talking about. So I want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure component of the IGS, which of course involves mainly the most visible element is the network and the data and stuff, but just a little bit, the data centers. Kerry Knoll has provided me with a few slides about that, just highlighting what we're going to talk about in the splinter, the formats. Mainly Ken McLeod has provided me a few slides about that at RINEX and RTCM. I want to talk, just give some pointers about how the infrastructure is supporting these pathways to precision, which is the title of the workshop. And then I'm going to talk about the splinter meeting agenda, which will have 1 minute after I present it. So that'll be very convenient. So basically, the first thing is the infrastructure. The biggest change recently has been, of course, the RINEX 3 implementation. I think that has gone about as well as I could have imagined. Completely delayed according to my original plan. But anyway, you make plans to break them, I guess. And I designed this little graphic saying this is the whole IGS value chain. So when we make changes, who is it going to affect? And so I've managed to tick off stuff. Don't worry if you can't read it. You can find the document online. Just shoot for RINEX 3 transition plan. We've managed to tick the first 3 boxes, which to me are the hardest. It means that receivers are supporting RINEX 3. It means that station operators know what to do with the RINEX 3 files. And it also means that they can now name their files correctly with the long names, okay? The other very important thing, of course, was that the data centers know where to store the files. And so that they're found in the traditional places where files should be. What I'm still missing, those are the number of RINEX 3 files that have been available at CDDIS. It's increasing. The numbers don't really matter, but it's been increasing. That's with proper names, okay? And this is the percent, okay? So we were getting RINEX 3 files in the MGEX directory for a long time with short names. Those were asked all to transition to long names, and this is the transition all the way to 100% a few days ago. Those data points are not equidistant to each other. I just plotted them all together because I don't check every single day, but there's been a lot of improvements as big station operators switched a whole bunch of stations at once. So, of course, there were big steps. So I have to say that we're overall very happy about this because it means that all the data is now in one place. It's all RINEX data. One is 2, one is 3. Everybody understands the differences in the names. And if you don't know how to use the data, that's not really our responsibility. But RINEX 3 is more complicated than RINEX 2. That's true. The station network, of course, here we have to thank David Maggart from UNAFCO, who's obviously part of the IGS Central Bureau. And the network has grown considerably. We have right now 500 stations called IGS. It doesn't mean that's all you can find, obviously. There's 448 stations that have had data in the last 10 days. This is a critical thing, and that's the reason for the red dots. Okay, so if a station has not had data in the last 10 days, you will see at the igs.org/network, you will see a red dot. Okay, so investigate if you know if that's at your station, then make sure you correct that situation. It also helps us if we get a suggestion for a station or somebody wants to makes a proposal to us. Then we check to see the area. So if somebody would propose a station now, for example, in the middle of Indonesia, we'll probably accept it right away because there are too many stations there without data regularly. So anyway, there are 198 real-time stations. So I think Axel and Lukis and of course all the BKG colleagues should be commended because that's a fantastic amount of data streams, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and they'll talk about it, of course, also in the real-time working group tomorrow, I believe. So in this last period, since the last workshop, it hasn't been that long, but we've had 31 stations have been added, 16 stations have been decommissioned. These are stations that didn't have data for more than a year, and either the station operator agreed that they were not going to revamp it or they didn't want to bring it back, or they would not answer more than 2 or 3 emails, okay? So we had to put some cutoff at some point. So if you feel like that was unfair or unjust, we can certainly bring them back, provided that the data flows get reinstated and that the antenna is calibrated and that the installation is up to our standards, okay? The equipment has been added, and of course the network coordinator works closely with the antenna working group. Arturo is now part of that, and I wish them very good relationship because, of course, equipment changes all the time. antennas, either calibrations or definitions or antenna reference points or whatever, everything has to be in our databases. And so anyway, so that's good. In terms of RINEX V3 and V2 data at the data centers, I won't read all of that from Kerry. The main highlights for me is all the data is together. You know those directories from CDDIS at least. The RINEX V2 continues in the 8.3.z Unix compress, and that's going to stay that way, unfortunately. But all the new data is coming with the .gzip, right? So that is a standard that is supported in all the Linux tools and all the Linux shells. So that's a little bit, a small step into the future. Not all providers are submitting data in RINEX 3 in daily, hourly, and high rate. Now, I don't expect everyone to submit high rate because that is a lot of bandwidth that you need, but at least in hourly would be, really nowadays in 2017, you should have enough bandwidth that you can get hourly files out. So that would be expected at least. Anyway, I also implemented a little software that CDDIS is running, similar to what Werner implemented many years ago, that generates the BRDC file for the RINEX 2. It's a very simple software, and I've kept it like that. I've had long conversations both with Peter Steigenberg and with Oliver about whether this should or should not be. I think they have a BRDC M and a BRDC X now in the MGES directory, which is in, and I think they are complementary. So if you find it useful, if you don't, let us know if there's any feedback. Otherwise, it's still there. It's going to be running every day. It takes all the mixed navigation messages from all the stations, and the next day provides a BRDC 00 IGS, which will be the combined IGS for multi-GNSS. Anyway, we're still missing a good QC implementation. I know there is a very good QC program called Anubis, and a lot of us are using it. We'll see a presentation a little bit later. But we still haven't implemented it in a way that satisfies our requirements at the data center or even at my level, so still looking at that. Stations at the CDDIS are very similar. Of course, they hold more data than what we hold, than what we consider IGS, so that's fair enough. They're a data center, they can do what they want. The main thing to me is obviously to highlight again that there's there's more than obviously double, half the stations are providing hourly in RINEX V2. And more or less that value holds for V3. I would expect that with the newer receivers that we should go higher. So it would be good if those 219 V3 stations actually go to hourly, apart from daily. And then the catastrophe is really in the high rate, because we only have 37 high rate stations in V3, and that ratio is completely out of whack compared to the V2. So I will be making efforts to get those station operators to see if we can get more high rate. Of course, the high rate are the shorter 15-minute 1 hertz files. So that's what interests me. That column, everything else looks good. The data's there. Of course, CDDIS had the transition to the HTTP put system. From our side, at least, it's worked okay. There are still some things that are being debugged between IGN and CDDIS in terms of equalizing the data holdings. So you may find that still for a little bit more, some data will be at IGN before it's at CDDIS. And also, since we heard that Bruno had personal family issues, it may take a little bit longer. So the next actions for the data centers will be basically, like I said, we are thinking, this was one of the initial actions, which was, are we going to rename all the old data MGES directory files? There's a lot of files in there in 8.3. So I've created a file called, an application called RX3name, which will spit out back to you on the command line a name, the proper, let's say the proper long name for your short name file. And that covers almost all stations in the IGS, UREF, GA. I've taken the biggest databases I could find and compiled it all together, and it works good. Otherwise, you can force, of course, your country code if it's not there, or I can recompile it, I don't care. Gav said RINEX, of course, does a lot more stuff, apart from renaming. But because it does a lot more stuff, some people were a little bit scared that it was changing their file, especially because the header ends up being. And so they asked me just to, what's the name, what a name tool should do, which is just to spit out a name. So anyway, they're both at the acc.igs.org, and you can see the tools there and a description of how they work. I think we will, actually, considering the success so far, we will go back in conversations with MJEX, go back and rename 2015's 14 and as far back as it makes sense. There's a problem because some signals were redefined at some point or something, so maybe we'll have to discuss if we want to go all the way back. Because I don't know if the RINEX header are actually saying the right RINEX version, because obviously that, but anyway. So the DCB products are now there at the data centers from the different MJEX participants. And we have high-rate data streams. This is, of course, very important. There's a new caster from the IGS at UCAR in Boulder. There's a new caster, well, new so-so at CDDIS. And you've had it for a while. And so we need to do even more, I believe, to share the load with BKG. And that's something that I think we're at least moving in the right direction, I hope. Anyway, we can discuss it a little bit later. In terms of the format, okay, this was submitted by Ken McLeod. I hope I can see him. There he is. And we have to really thank him for following this up. As you can imagine, managing formats is a very thankless task. Everybody complains and nobody hardly ever congratulates. And so Ken has done a really good job in continuing to make changes. Also, we gang up on him sometimes, like recently on changing the Beidou assignation from 2 back to 1 or 1 back to 2, I forget now. Anyway, RINEX 303 update 1 has been released for a while. No reported issues so far. I actually did not check before the talk whether there were that many submissions in 302. I know on 303. I know 302 has been submitted very... You're doing 303s, okay, so at least we got some. Because that's the thing, you can approve a new format that has all kinds of nice characteristics, but if the vendors don't support it, they'll continue writing 301 or 302 or 3 or whatever. And so we need to really push them once it's there that they make use of the new format. So the CNAF will have its own little thing, so I won't say much about that, but of course the L2C message needs to be properly captured. And then when the new Beidou ICD is released, we'll need a new version number probably. Okay. This is with respect to the, with the streaming standard. So streaming of data is working extremely well. I mean, I think anybody that has tried to use the NTRIP, sign up, you know, you get your credentials, you figure out how NTRIP works, which is not obvious at first. But once you have it, you can generate your own files. You can, you know, send this stream to an application. It's really cool, and it works really well. I'm very surprised even to this day. And we have all these signals, and those messages that you get support the observation to the quality level of a RINEX 303. And that was one of the main points. And that was difficult to get from the RTCM because they did not see the point of having the extra precision, which we need in space geodesy, but they obviously do not need for navigating the ocean. But anyway, so that's been great work by Lucas and by Ken. Not all tracked signals are encoded. So what will happen is that you'll get a caster will be submitting all the data from the station in the stream. You'll get that, you'll make your RINEX, then you download the real RINEX, because it comes from the station operator, and they will not have the same because some stuff is not there. So you may not have signal to noise, or you may not have blah, blah, blah. It depends on the receiver type. But so we're encouraging people to, of course, store their own RINEX, but not distribute them except for high-rate files. And we also encourage people to go back to the source and look for files that are _R, which means they come from the receiver. So if you can find them, I think those are the safest bet. The state space representation has to do with the corrections that you get. So if you're a user of the corrections, then you'll get these corrections to modify the navigation message that you're receiving and to make the accuracy much higher. I know little about this, so I will not step on Lucas's field. And the interoperability group has been formed because obviously there are new messages that they want to push. The vendors are reluctant to accept all the new messages, and of course it has a lot to do with this ambiguity fixing in real time, which they don't want people to have access to, and we want to try to be as open as possible. Okay, the CNAF thing is again, so not all track signals and the thing. Okay, so Ken will talk about that. Supporting increased precision for me. So let's say, to me, I think we have shown as an element of the IGS that we are completely committed to supporting precision. But that means that we have to help station operators, provide them clear guidelines, and help them with the vendors, because it's proven completely that when we have Ken and Lucas that have a direct line to the vendors for the RTCM Subcommission 104, they really listen. Okay, so that's very important. So if we need stuff done, we really need to make sure that the equipment is available for them to buy. Because it's been great for many years to ask everything from the stations when there was no equipment available, or the equipment that was available was extremely expensive. Yesterday we saw two examples of solutions that people can buy for reasonable prices for their stations, and having such high quality equipment can only be done when we're talking to the equipment makers, otherwise it doesn't work. So in that sense, I think we are supporting the increased precision. The infrastructure needs feedback from you. If you process data, if you discover data holes in files, if you discover that antennas are not what they're supposed to be. I know code are quite good at telling me when there are problems, but not everybody is. And so I need to develop better ways of getting the feedback back to the network coordinator, to myself, so that we can prepare a plan to go to the stations. If you just write to a station individually, they will most likely not listen to you. The station is not there for you, it's there for some other reason. Normally they have their own prerogative of why the equipment is there. But if we approach them in a systematic way and explain things properly, they usually do react. So we can fix problems. Also, so we can praise them, okay? So people that are doing very significant efforts, in particular in terms of making sure that their antennas are as untouched as possible, long time series, blah, blah, blah. I also need, well, we are trying to adapt with new formats, antennas, receiver signals. All of these needs should be communicated from the working groups to the antenna working group, to the data centers, to me, if possible, to the RINEX working group, if it's relevant to formats. But please don't go it alone. So don't just change your antennas as it happened to a very three-letter organization, and then we ended up with no data from NGA for like 8 or 10 years because there were no calibration. So if you're going to change antennas, just check with us. And if it's not calibrated, maybe we can help you, put you in contact with people that calibrate antennas, etc. So don't just make changes which then affect everybody and make your station unusable for many applications.